Hate doing cardio? Try brushing and flossing your teeth. I'm not talking about building up a sweat. I'm talking about building a healthier mouth for a healthier heart, for a healthier you. Smile Generation. Trusted dentists look at your care through the lens of the mouth-body connection, because what happens in the mouth plays a critical role for the rest of your body. To find a dentist near you, committed to treating all of you, visit smilegeneration.com/confidence today and live longer, healthier, and happier with confidence unleashed.
So hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Unpacking Possibility. I'm your host, Traci Stein, as always. I'm so happy to be here with you. Today's episode is actually an encore presentation of my interview with Garrett Stevens. It's one of my favorite interviews to date, and I think you'll pretty quickly see why. Garrett is the chairman and president of Hemi-Sync. Now, if that name sounds familiar, either Garrett's or Hemi-Sync, it may be because you've heard me talk about Hemi-Sync before. Maybe you're familiar with my 3 audio programs with Hemi-Sync on cultivating intuition. But Hemi-Sync is the audio technology. It's a type of brainwave entrainment that helps us very rapidly and more easily get into a particular type of desired predominant brainwave state. So, for example, Hemi-Sync has a ton of different audio programs. That's actually almost an understatement. But the different types of brainwave entrainment will help you to do, again, whatever the demand is at the time. So it might be that you want to sleep more deeply. Well, there's a specific type of brainwave entrainment for that. Or maybe you want to concentrate on something you really have to pay strict attention to. You're working on something. And that would be a different version of Hemi-Sync. Or perhaps you want to go deeper into your meditations and get into a meditative state more rapidly and so forth. And that's the tip of the iceberg about Hemi-Sync and what it can do. Again, Garrett will do a better job, I think, of explaining the what, how, and why of Hemi-Sync. You'll hear about Garrett's personal story, which I find really compelling. He really was somebody who had not grown up thinking he was going to take the helm of Hemi-Sync or a company like that. Garrett was a successful professional in the financial world and had been, as he says, kind of compartmentalizing his life and looking into more meditative and personal growth and esoteric studies and practices separately on his own time. When a family tragedy happened, that effectively changed the course of Garrett's life. So between Garrett's fascinating story and the incredible technology of Hemi-Sync, I think you'll get a lot out of this episode. I certainly hope you do. Please, either way, let me know what you think. Leave me a comment. And as always, I hope you will subscribe to the podcast, click like, leave a review. All of that really helps me continue bringing good content to you. So without further ado, let's get to the episode. Garrett, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. I'm so excited to have you on the show. I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can tell me where you want me to begin. I took a pretty conventional, low risk path through most of my life. I went to school and got good grades like they tell you to do, right? I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do when I was younger, but I knew that I wanted the ability to eventually shape my own path.
I love that.
And to have some freedom. And so to me, that meant making as much money as quickly as I could.
Okay. It's the American dream.
It's the American way, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I took a pretty conventional path to doing that. I went to an undergraduate business program at Wharton. I majored in finance. I went to Wall Street. I was an investment banker. Then I worked for a hedge fund. And that all seemed to be going pretty well. And it's interesting when, things start to turn in your life, when you reach turning points. You'll see a number of things starting to point in a specific direction. And, it's how we sort of meet those points kind of determines our life path, right? Like, do we resist it? Do we, dive headfirst into it? In my case, I think I went through a lot of, okay, yeah, I get it. Like, I need to go do some work that is more fulfilling, that serves a higher purpose. Just give me a little bit more time, And so I went through this for several years. I kept having this inner feeling that, I had needed and wanted to do something else. I didn't know if it was something more entrepreneurial, or something more about service, about inner work. There wasn't really a job out there that kind of included all of those things. So I had to create it. And I didn't know exactly what form that would take. I tried a lot of different things. In 2015, things really started to get forced. And so I sort of needed to figure something else out, because the job that I was at, that, I'd done quite well at, it was kind of winding down. It had run its course. And so I needed to either go get another finance job or figure something else out. And by this time, I had attempted to acquire more than one small business, because I thought that was the easiest way to build something that fit me well. And I actually think more people should be doing that. I mean, owning a small business is not for everyone, but if you want some freedom, if you want to be able to make your own schedule, to work for yourself, and to kind of control your path to the extent that that's possible, owning a small business is a good way to go. So by the time 2015 was done, I had become an outreach trainer for Monroe Institute. And so that was kind of my first step towards actually doing some work that felt like it was aligned with my inner purpose, with higher purpose. And as I kind of got to know the folks in the Monroe community, it became apparent that Hemi-Sync, and for people that aren't familiar with the world of Bob Monroe, Bob Monroe basically split his activities between Monroe Institute, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to research and education, and Interstate Industries, which is better known as Hemi-Sync. And that kind of held Bob's, basically it's a cross between a record label and an audio guidance technology. So it's kind of a media company. And so that became available for sale in late 2016. And I think I actually set the intention to acquire it way back in 2010. When I first started feeling like it was time to do something else.
Garrett, can we backtrack for a second? Because before you go on, I want to have a better sense of, your personal journey. It's more, Hemi-Sync is more than self-improvement. It is very spiritual. There's a spiritual theme running through it. I would say there's a transpersonal theme.
Yeah.
It is really cutting edge. And I'm curious, were you using the technology early on, or were you doing other things kind of in that realm, even though you had this very conventional day job?
Yeah. So if we go way back, I was kind of a different kid. So I would see things that other kids didn't see. And I thought everyone was seeing them, but they weren't. And that didn't become apparent to me until I was a little bit older. And so I
spirits, energy,
angels, spirits, things like that. Yeah. And so that didn't become apparent to me until I was a little bit older. But I kind of had that sort of inner knowing or vision open to me from a pretty early age. And I was always kind of drawn to this stuff. In my formative years, I also went to a Krishnamurti school. I don't know if you know who Jiddu Krishnamurti is, but
vaguely, but I think you should explain it, definitely.
So he would probably blanch at the idea that he was a guru, because he was a proponent of the teacherless path. But he would give talks that pointed people in a certain direction. It's kind of like, pointing at the moon. And my parents, again, like he didn't really have followers because he didn't like the idea of followers, but they would go to the talks. And I went to his school. And at the time, he was still living. And so he'd kind of like walk around the school sometimes, through the garden or whatever. And I was maybe like 8 or 9 years old at the time. And I remember like seeing him. And for like some part of me recognized this inner quality in him that was very free and liberated and, I don't know, peaceful, but strong and joyful and like all these qualities that we all think that we want for ourselves, but don't really know how to access or embody. And so I could remember seeing him and thinking, I want to be like that. But how you do that is sort of the question, right? And so, time went on and like, again, I took this very conventional path and I kind of like suppressed that side of it and was very like analytical, very left brain, until about, I did some inner work through this time, but it was like compartmentalized. So it was like my spiritual stuff was over here and like my everyday kind of living stuff was over here and like never the twain shall meet.
Like meditation or something else?
Yeah. So, mostly meditation. And to really kind of get into all of this in like a deep level will take a lot of time, but yeah, let's call it meditation.
Okay.
And then like my business finance stuff was all over here. And, they were bifurcated, like they were kind of siloed. And I knew that this wasn't sustainable over the long term. But it was working for me at that time. And I felt like I was developing along parallel paths. Maybe not in a way that was long-term sustainable, but it was working for me at that time. And so this kind of went along fairly smoothly until 2009. Actually, so even before that, so like 1995, 96, that was the first time that I became aware of Hemi-Sync. And so I was, and so I was flying home from college, and like the in-flight magazine on United at that time, had an ad for Hemi-Sync. And so, it had like the image of, it had the image of like the brain waves, the incoherent state and the coherent state. And I remember seeing that and thinking, oh, that's pretty cool. I wonder if it actually works. And like it sort of passed out of my memory and I didn't think about it again for a while. Early 2000s, I went home for Christmas one year, and my dad had the whole Gateway Experience set. And
my goodness.
Yeah. And so I can remember seeing those and thinking, oh, that's the stuff I saw on the plane. And he's like, yeah, they're pretty cool. You should check them out while you're here. And like, I think he'd only opened like wave 1 or something. Like the rest were all still shrink wrap. But I didn't try it then. We kind of went through Christmas. I went back to work doing my 90-hour weeks. And and so that was that. And so I kind of kept on going along these parallel paths until like 2009. And so around that time, it was the global financial crisis. And so my dad kind of got he kind of got in over his head. We had like a big fight about it because I sort of had to bail him out. So we had this big fight, this falling out, and then he died, like suddenly. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. And so that was very tough. And like I felt grief on a level that I don't think I'd ever felt before. And it actually opened my heart, like the pain of it opened my heart in a way that it actually needed to be opened. Like for a long time, I was kind of going along these parallel paths and noticing that like I wasn't fully feeling things, like they weren't landing on me. And I realized that was a problem. And I think a lot of men have this problem, maybe are not fully aware of it. They think like, oh, I'm just tough, I don't feel things. I don't cry.
It's a more comfortable way for a lot of men to be, or a lot of people to be,
Yeah.
It's safe.
Right. And so I kind of went through this period where I was just like ripped open, like feeling all these things I hadn't felt in a long time. And, from the outside looking in, it probably looked like I was going to crisis. From the inside, it felt a little bit like crisis. But so long story short, I inherited all my dad's stuff. And so it was like all in my garage. And so I started going through some of it and I opened this box and like there were all the Gateway discs. And there was all of Bob's books, all of Bob Monroe's books.
Wow.
And an application to Gateway Voyage that he had filled out and never sent it. So I started going through Gateway on my own. A lot of them were still shrink wrapped. I think the last 3 or 4 waves were still shrink wrapped. And I started going through them, and it's kind of wow, this is pretty wild. And I had a spontaneous out of body experience shortly before that. That was in a flotation tank. That was kind of my first experience with OBE. So I tried to go back to that float tank a few times to replicate the experience, and I couldn't do it. And so I was looking for ways that I could, have the experience again, because the first time it happened, I wanted to go see my dad, and I felt like that was possible because it still felt like he was close at that time, shortly after his death. And when I had the OBE, I thought, oh, wow, am I going to go see him now? And I thought, well, wait a second, he passed of a heart attack, and I'd felt these vibrations in my chest before kind of projecting. And so I thought, oh, well, shit, am I dying too? And so as soon as that fear factor kicked in, I was like, wham,
Back in the body.
Back in my body. And so, I had to do this again because I'd screwed it up. And when I went back to the float tank, it didn't have the same effect. It wasn't working the same way again. And so I was doing some searching, and I found Bob Monroe's name. I found his books. I found William Buhlman, who had just started giving his OB workshops at the Institute at that time. And so, I was kind of working with OBE. I was reading Robert Bruce's stuff as well. Rest in peace, Robert Bruce. He just passed a month or two ago.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so, so I was going through this period where I was trying to master OBE. I was doing the Gateway discs all around the same time. And so this culminated in my going to the Institute in 2009 to take Bill Buhlman's OBE workshop. I took Gateway Voyage the following year, and I became a trainer in 2015. But that following year, in 2010 or 2011, I guess, I think that's probably where I first set the intention to acquire Hemi-Sync. At that time, it became apparent to me that it was its own separate thing, it was a company. And of course, my business mind thinking it's a company, that can be acquired.
I have to take a quick break, but we'll be back in a few moments with more from Garrett Stevens of Hemi-Sync. Stay tuned.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Whether you love true crime or comedy, celebrity interviews or news, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue. And guess what? Now you can call them on your auto insurance too with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. It works just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show you coverage options that fit your budget. Get your quote today at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
But, 7 years passed before I actually did. And so I don't know, this is a very roundabout kind of circuitous way of telling my story, but
it's actually perfect. And I have 1,000 questions, but I want to not interrupt you because it's really such a compelling story. And I think people's journeys are the destination. I think we forget that this whole thing is important. I think your father bought the Gateway CDs for you.
Yeah, it kind of feels that way, right?
And wow, I'm so moved, honestly. And I think people listening will be too, because, I think a lot of people can relate to feeling like you've got to compartmentalize and do these practical things. And there's a lot of reward that comes with that too. But just the fact that you were this child, already experiencing these things that most people, I think, secretly want to.
Yeah.
Right. But, our daytime world kind of pulls us away from that.
Yeah.
But it sounds, it was part of your path.
Right. And so I think modern life causes a lot of this type of splitting, compartmentalization.
Yeah.
and it tends to get resolved through crisis. And so it's like the old, actually, I'm not even sure if this is true, but supposedly like the Chinese symbol for opportunity, like the character of opportunity is both, is it crisis or how's it? I'm butchering the analogy, but in crisis, there is both, there's some scary stuff. And there's also opportunity. And a lot of it is the mindset that we bring to it.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I now have a better understanding of how you wound up where you are. Because full disclosure for anybody listening, a lot of people who listen to this podcast know that I now have 3 albums with Hemi-Sync, which was also an intention and a dream, but I didn't even think it could happen. And that happened after you acquired it.
Yeah.
And I kind of not randomly, but I guess semi-randomly reached out. But I had been listening to Hemi-Sync for a really long time and also living this somewhat split life. So, I think some people might have curiosity about Hemi-Sync, but unless they've worked with me and I've explained it to them, they may not yet know what it is or even who Robert Monroe was or the Monroe Institute. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that just to clarify for anybody who's new to this.
Yeah. So, Bob was also a businessman. He really kind of made his bones in New York City radio, which was, national radio, back in the 40s and 50s. And he was a polymath. So he would produce the show, script them, create the music for a lot of them. He went on like this and was very successful, for a long period of time. And then at some point he spontaneously started going out of his body and, thought this was very strange, wanted to understand what was going on with this. Sort of the short version of the story is, because of his background in radio, he was very skilled with sound. And so he became interested in using sound to learn while you sleep. And as a byproduct of that work, of that research, he was able to figure out that you could use audio guidance technology based in binaural beats. So for those of you that don't know what a binaural beat is, it's basically when you have one signal in your left ear, let's say. So let's say it's 100 hertz, and a separate signal in your right ear, that's say 104 hertz. Your brain automatically makes a third signal that is not on the recording that is the difference between those two. So in the case of 100 and 104 hertz, it'd be 4 hertz, which is a theta signal. And that's very convenient because the adult human brain can't process anything under about 20 hertz. And so you can basically trick your mind into hearing the signals by using a binaural beat. And there are some very useful frequencies below 20 hertz. The adult human brain typically functions in beta. So if you're going to work, multitasking, you're probably in high beta, which is something over, a little rusty with these right now, but I think I want to say over like 20, 25 hertz. And being constantly in high beta is often a mark of success with, type A successful people these days. You're always busy. So you ask someone how they're doing, they say, oh, busy, busy, busy. Well, if you're always busy, odds are you're in high beta almost all the time. And it's not healthy because your sympathetic nervous system is always activated and it's injecting your body with adrenaline and cortisol. And, over time that leads to things like atherosclerosis, problems of that nature. So below high beta would be low beta. That can be a very useful productive state. That's from like 14 to 20 hertz. Under beta.
So you're focusing. You're focusing on a task, but you're not anxious or overstimulated.
Right. It's a light, comfortable focus level where you're concentrated. Underneath that is alpha. So that's from like 7 to 14 hertz. Beneath that. And so alpha is great for relaxation, things of that nature. Below alpha is theta. So that's like a borderland sleep state. That's kind of 48 hertz.
Like deep meditation.
Yeah. So these, liminal hypnagogic or hypnopompic states going into or out of sleep. That's theta. And then underneath theta would be delta. So that's from like half a hertz to 4 hertz. And so that's a sleep state.
It's deep.
So yeah,
like almost like dreamless or dreamless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Hemi-Sync is basically binaural beat recipes that have been tested over thousands of hours of clinical research. So these specific combinations of binaural beats are known to facilitate certain specific states of consciousness, such as a mind-awake body asleep state. And there are various other states as well. And we give them just kind of arbitrary markers called focus levels. So the mind-awake body asleep state would be focus 10. So I forgot your initial question, but
that's okay.
Yeah, that's a bit about Bob and Hemi-Sync.
Yeah, and I want people to get a sense too. This auditory technology. It's from the consumer end, the user end. It's simple because you put on headphones. You're listening to sometimes verbal guidance, sometimes not. Usually music or nature sounds, and then the binaural beats are embedded in that. The Hemi-Sync recipes, which are much more complex than you would normally get in a typical binaural beat app or something like that.
Right, or off YouTube, for instance, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. And people can use these to feel better, to change their lives, to learn while they sleep or meditate.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some of the ways people can improve their lives by using Hemi-Sync? Like, what is Hemi-Sync used for?
So we use them in 5 specific application areas. So one is meditation. So we've kind of covered that. Sleep. So that'd be more delta focused. Relaxation. Fourth would be concentration and tasks of vigilance. And then the 5th would be wellness. So in all of these, you are creating new neural pathways, basically creating new habits, while you're shedding the habits that no longer serve you, to improve your overall life, both in terms of, inner life, and hopefully as well as your outer life. Yeah.
So helpful for everything from getting homework done to or a project and focusing better, like you said, to, I know you have ones on weight loss. You have ones on connecting your awareness with people who have passed away. It's a more mystical kind of use, intuitive development, a whole bunch of them. So there's a huge range.
They range from very practical to very, very esoteric. Yeah.
And I think they're amazing. I mean, I have literally used them for as long as I've been using guided imagery and have known about them. So I'm going to say in the decades range.
Wow.
So not that young. So I've been using it for a while.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm probably up to, what is that now? Yeah, probably 15 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, the one I use most, one of my top 3 is definitely a Hemi-Sync one. And that's actually the Hemi-Sync Manifesting by Joe Gallenberger.
That's a great one.
32 minutes. I go so deep, I don't hear anything. And then I come back when he gives the suggestions to come back. And that's been out for a while. But it's hard not to make time for 32 minutes.
Yeah. It's a nice little break in the day. You feel refreshed when it's done.
Absolutely. And it actually works.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. I feel the same way. Yeah. I mean, it's obviously made a pretty big difference in my life. Both from, inner development to, again, things like everyday living, manifestation. We kind of talked a bit about that. But yeah, it really runs the gamut in terms of the applications.
It's entirely up to you, but I'm wondering if you either have an anecdote somebody has shared with you or a personal story where you're like, I know that Hemi-Sync it led to this for me or for this person, or you could see the connection.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people share stories like that over the years. It's funny though, like once you're on the spot, it's like hard to remember the specifics around them.
I'll share one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So, and I don't want to look like I keep bringing up the same thing from a while, 7 years ago now, but literally, it was a passing thought before I laid down to listen to the Joe Gallenberger manifesting one. And I really wanted my guided imagery to get out there to more people. You know, I had done a bunch of albums with Health Journeys. Now Hay House has acquired the catalog, but you know, and I remember just having a passing thought. I don't even know if it felt like my thought, like, oh, you know, well, if Oprah found out about it, then, you know, my stuff would get out to more people. And within 2 weeks, I got contacted by an editor for O Magazine to do hypnosis with her, and then was profiled in the January 2017 O Magazine for doing hypnosis to help this woman stop biting her nails. And she'd been like a severe lifelong nail biter and had tried everything. So, you know, I actually believe that that wasn't a coincidence. I really don't. And I think, you know, also because the thought was, you know, the flavor was of service, not of ego. And I think that has something to do with it. Cause I wasn't thinking like, oh, I'm going to be, you know, cause I'm not really a front of the house type of personality. Oh, I'm really more of a behind.
About that.
I mean, I'm very used to being kind of quietly doing my thing. So, you know, it was something I wouldn't have expected.
No.
You know, but I mean, you know, even things like just finding a way to like, oh, like you have this pain in your body and it's like, oh, finding a way to create a sense of ease.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like Hemi-Sync is useful for that.
Yeah. But, you know, I think you're bringing up an interesting point too. You know, once you're able to create lifestyle circumstance or work that aligns your kind of inner life or inner purpose with your everyday physical life, I think you find that there are capacities within you that come to the fore that maybe you didn't realize that you had before. Because we tend to think of ourselves in very fixed ways by the time we're of a certain age, you know, adolescence. And it's like a box. And, or, you know, maybe more like a mold. You know, we've created this mold for ourselves and we think it's fixed and like we can't get out of it. But we're quite a bit more than that. And if we start to tap into these inner resources and you're able to, you know, bring it out into the world and like have it seen, you understand that you're actually kind of limitless. So yes, you might perceive yourself in a certain way, but that's not all there is, you know, it's not fixed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Garrett, it's my stream of consciousness is kind of my normal way of thinking. So I usually have to corral it. So, yeah. But I'm pulling one of the pieces in my thought balloon down for a second, because, you know, you were talking before about something that is so common and people in the US, at least, I feel like don't do a great job of talking about. And that's sitting with loss, which no one wants to sit with, understandably. Right. You know, the longing for the person increases. It doesn't decrease once they're no longer physically available. And, you know, I myself am going through that right now as well. And, you know, Scott Taylor, who's done albums for Hemi-Sync, came on the podcast, you know, a few months ago now, but talking about how you were talking before also about like either chaos or, you know, I'm going to say tragedy can really be the entryway to incredible personal growth and opportunity. And, you know, his personal tragedy was that his girlfriend and her son were killed in a tragic car accident.
Yeah. And
that generated this instantaneous transpersonal experience of connection with them. But that put him on a completely different path. And he has, you know, not only used Hemi-Sync to help facilitate this feeling of connection and this oneness. He says, I no longer have a fear of dying. I mean, that's an incredible transformation.
Yeah.
But also to facilitate, help other people have these journeys into the space that is part of them, but greater than themselves at the same time. I'm not articulating that all that well. But it just kind of reminded me a little bit about what you were talking about with your own journey.
Yeah. And again, like I think, you know, crisis kind of comes for all of us. And, you know, the mindset that you take into it goes a long way towards determining, what the outcome of it is. So, fear is, I think, like the natural reaction for a lot of us. And like fear is like a very like low vibrational state.
And resistance.
Resistance. Yeah. And so, I think the first key to moving through crisis in a productive way is just observing how you're reacting to it. So if you habitually respond with fear, and you're able to see that, like it gives you some separation from it, right? And so now that you have that separation and you can see that you're doing this, that you're behaving in a habitual way, you have the opportunity now, you have a little space to flip it. Maybe you can't flip it, 180, but if you can just think of like a slightly more positive way of looking at it, like that can create a big shift. And like from there you can build.
100%.
And that I think is really how you move through crisis and use it as an opportunity.
100%. And I feel like using resources like Hemi-Sync and creating space for yourself to go within and to be curious, I feel like it helps us to create or discover, maybe is a better word, our own inner ally. So that we don't have to feel like we're so alone when we're dealing with things that are challenging or just trying to create a positive change that's felt a little bit hard to create previously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. You mentioned, overcoming the fear of death too. As you get through like all the fears, like that is kind of the big one that underlies all of them.
Mm.
And I do think that, using Hemi-Sync or just kind of generally exploring expanded states of consciousness, which may or may not include like a full OBE, out of body experience. That is, I think, the number one benefit. Coming to understand that you exist beyond your physical body. That can really be a game changer. It sort of changes the context for everything.
Absolutely. And personally, I feel like it's one of those things that's hard to adequately put into words. It's much better, I think, understood in through an experiential process.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason why I've recommended it to so many people. And I know you do too. I mean, you've devoted your life to this. I mean, if that doesn't say something, what does?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, you kind of mentioned the inner ally as well. Secondary benefit, or maybe the primary benefit, depending on who you ask, is you sort of develop access to this internal guidance system, or just to, guidance writ large. And so, yes, it's important to use your logical thinking, analytical mind to, assess situations. But it's also important to access intuition or, inner resources, that are, I think actually more important in, decision making or in choosing our life path. As opposed to just, using logic and rational thought. You kind of have to have both. Because something can seem like it makes sense, but if you have like a bad feeling about it, like it's going to be messed. Like you have to respect
Totally
that.
true.
And I think the opposite is also kind of true. Like if something doesn't make sense to you logically, be careful.
Definitely. So I wanted to ask you a question because I just, I think it's kind of like most things that can be helpful. There are some people who may not find that a tool is the right fit because I don't think there's anything that works equally well for everybody. Are there any people that you would say, maybe this may not be the right tool for you? I'm just curious.
So, we'll get some stories of people that, there was one person on our YouTube channel today, and like I was just kind of checking the comments. I decided to reply to one. But this person, he was working on Focus 3. And he was reporting, what do you say? I feel like my body is numb and tingly, and I can hear my heart beating, and it's making me scared. So, that's natural. So I would say the numb and tingling sensation in the body is an indication that you're entering a deeply relaxed state, like your body's falling asleep. So like that's what focus 3 is supposed to do. Hearing your heart beating, or sometimes even like feeling or hearing the blood rushing through your veins, like that's an indication that your kinesthetic faculty is waking up or opening up. So I would say like also a good sign. Now, like how you respond to that is sort of the question. So again, this kind of goes back to mindset. So you're encountering experiences that might be very new to you. It's natural to respond with a fear response. That's one possibility. My suggestion was to spend a bit more time with this preparatory process, really try to like raise his energy level before going into the exercise. If you've gotten to the stage of using your resonant energy balloon or reball, like really spend time with that. Understanding that you're an immortal spiritual being that cannot be harmed. And when you can shift your mindset a little bit into, like I'm actually making progress. Like this is, these are good signs. Then you can really build on it. But, if you feel like the fear response is too much, like you also don't need to push it.
Right.
And so for that person, like maybe the answer is this isn't for you, at least not at this time. So, there aren't really any hard and fast answers. Just kind of depends. But like that's an example of where I think it could be either, either this is a good sign for you and you're making progress, or it's not for you. But whether it is or it isn't, I think goes back to mindset.
Yeah. And I know sometimes even like with like my recorded hypnosis program, audio programs, like the vast majority of feedback is like, thank you so much. This is great. If, if somebody is, they have to be open to using that particular tool. It has to be a good fit for them. Once in a while, somebody will find like it's triggering their anxiety a little bit because they're not used to going within. And, I always just say it's okay to set it aside. Maybe it's time to work with a provider on the anxiety.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the first step. And I think that's completely fine. And people have to just kind of listen to themselves.
Yeah. I think, yeah.
But generally, I do think it's a safe and super helpful technique.
Yes.
Both Hemi-Sync and hypnosis. And I think most people can comfortably try this.
Yes, definitely. But, we also don't tell people to force it.
No, definitely.
We are quite confident that it is safe for, 99% of the population. Some people might have, some tinnitus, and okay, if that happens, back off. That's really the only specific case that I can think of. And like, we don't put anything out unless we're really confident that the carrier, that's our word for these Hemi-Sync recipes, is safe and effective.
And like you said, there's quite a lot of research on Hemi-Sync technology. It's not a new technology. So it's not like, well, let's see what happens.
Right. Yeah. No,
we're not done your homework.
We're not throwing stuff against the wall to see if it sticks.
No.
Yeah.
Garrett, I know you do trainings for Monroe. I know you do trainings for Hemi-Sync separately, or
I don't actually train for Monroe anymore.
Okay. You did.
I do some stuff for Hemi-Sync. As things have grown, like I spend more and more time running the business versus giving trainings. But yeah, I do like to do both.
Are there trainings, workshops, new audio programs, anything coming out that you'd like to talk about?
So, Gateway Experience has gone viral over the last handful of years. And, with that, you have kind of problems and opportunities. I think one of the problems we've seen is, there are these little communities popping up on message boards like Reddit or Telegram, Discord, where, people are talking about gateway experience, which is great. And some folks, know what they're talking about, and a lot of them don't. And so,
like with most things,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And so we felt a need to kind of respond directly to that. And so we developed our own course called CIA Gateway Experience, or the Gateway Experience Declassified, which is based on what is kind of colloquially known as the CIA Gateway Report. It's actually a Department of Army Intelligence document that was done in 1983 and declassified in 2003, where an Army intelligence officer went to attend Gateway Voyage and wrote like a 26-page report about it, 27, 28, but a very long report that is basically a tour de force of, metaphysics, physics. It's quite an impressive document. If you haven't had a chance to read it, I highly suggest you do.
I will.
And so we've built this course that kind of walks people through Gateway experience, but the report as well. And so that came out last year. It's on the website. It is mostly self-guided, but I am available to personally respond to people's questions and to support them, create a holding environment for them. And so, we've been excited about that. There are a variety of other courses on the website as well, and there are new releases that come out basically once a month. So
great.
Please be on the lookout for those.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Garrett, is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have, or anything that we should chat about before you get back to your incredibly busy day?
Well, I try to make sure they aren't too busy. But no, I think we covered the waterfront there. That was a very productive use of however much time that was. It felt like it flew by.
It did fly by.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how much I appreciate your coming on. I was laughing to myself silently before because I was thinking, you're not my boss, but in a way, kind of. So
No,
I was minimally nervous, like for a moment before we logged on today. I was thinking like, I have to do a reasonably decent job.
No, I was hoping to do a reasonably decent job. So, thanks for having me on, Traci. It
was so fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So great to get to know you a little bit from a different perspective.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for
so I
letting me
will
share.
My pleasure. So I will put the links to Hemi-Sync and to the Gateway material specifically in the show notes. Garrett, thank you so much. This has been another episode of Unpacking Possibility. If you enjoyed the show, and I know you did, please remember to like, share, follow, leave me a comment. Let me know how you're doing. And of course, until next time, be well.